Welcome back to a new video. Today we are recapping what I read in January, and I wanted to find a way to make my end of the year recaps a little bit easier. So I decided that I wanted to do a tier maker. I know a lot of people do these at the end of the year. Bernadette Banner does them to recap historical TV shows and movies. I know Zoran did one for her reading recap. I did make one. It is public, so I'll share the link in the description box. So I made one for me. The link is going to be down in the description box in case you want to also participate with my particular tier ranking system. I decided this year that I wanted to maybe take a step away from star rankings, and so instead I was like, what do I sort of categorize books as? And so we have 8 categories. Masterpiece / most meaningful, would read again, excellent, good, average, decent, absolutely not, and then I did add DNF on there. And there is no particular reason why I decided to make this year other than I find star ratings a little bit difficult, especially when it comes to like 4 and 5 stars. 3 stars is pretty average. It's not that often that I give a 1 or 2 star rating. It does happen every once in a while, but that 3 to 5 star range can be so broad for me that having like average to masterpiece most meaningful, some books kind of flow between 2 categories. So I think instead of babbling on and on, I think we can get right into it. I do have a cup of half-drunk coffee here. I would recommend getting a beverage or a snack of choice. And let's get into it, shall we? So the first book that I read this month was a volume in the Witch Had Atellier. It doesn't have the in it, but I keep wanting to say the Witch Had Atellier. It's Witch Had Atellier manga series. Side note, I also figured this would be a good way for me to talk about the books that I read this month, so it's gonna be a little bit of everything. So Witch Had Atellier volume 6, I ranked it would read again, which I absolutely would. They're gonna be square photos instead of landscape. So sorry. Maybe I'll figure that out for next month. Witch Had Atellier, volume 6. It goes under would read again. I'm really enjoying this series. This is another volume in it. I'm finding that the volumes themselves are not so much, I haven't been finding a lot of standout volumes where I'm like, oh yes, this volume ranks higher than this one, which I'm enjoying. I don't need this series to be up and down for me. I'm quite happy if at the end I would reread it from the beginning to end, and at this point, that's where I am. So very happy with that. This continued the story of this girl, Coco, who finds out about magic, mistakenly casts a spell that harms her mom, and then is whisked away to this world with wizardry and is taught about the rules of magic, but isn't really sure if she's going to be able to undo what she's done. She actually practiced this very dark, sort of bad, blacklisted magic, and there's these people with kind of funky little caps that seem to be trying to use Coco to get this magic back out in the world and sort of topple the wizardry system that's in place. And with every single installation, I am just more and more blown away by how vast this world is and how within like just under 200 pages of every volume, so much is able to be fleshed out and is happening. These characters are growing and developing. I'm loving it. Then I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was a reread for me. This is one of my all-time favorite books. It's going under Masterpiece Most Meaningful. I have nothing but good things to say about this book. It is just, 10 years ago, it burrowed into my heart and it has stayed there ever since. It's probably, actually, I don't know if it's the book that I own the most copies of anymore, but I own several copies of this book. I have artwork on my wall of this book. I have like random things around my house, like mugs and keychains and things like that. It's one of those stories that I'm happy to collect things that belong to it because it just means that much to me. This is a story about a girl named Celia and a boy named Marco, and when they were children, before they even really understood what was going on in the world, they were entered into a competition by Celia's dad and Marco's mentor, we'll call him, because the two of them have been battling for ever, it seems like, pitting pupils against each other to prove whose teaching style and whose illusion style outmatches the other. And the premise for this book sets it up to be sort of a slow burn, you're in it for the long game, because they have to teach their pupils and then set a stage, pick the arena, and then they begin to compete, and the competition lasts years, decades, until there is one winner. And so while that's the central part of the story, there's also these really incredible side characters. We get to see into the minds of people that are affected by this game and the magic that Celia and Margot are doing, and it is incredibly immersive. The writing style is so mind-blowing to me because every time I step foot into that book, I am whisked away again on this story, and that is all I can ask for when I open a book. Okay, popping back to Witch Had Atellier with volume 7. This ranks under Would Read Again, I believe, yes. And I don't really have much to say about the following volumes because I don't want to give spoilers, obviously. We have That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming, which I loved this book. This book came so close to being masterpiece. So I am gonna put it in Would Read Again because it didn't quite hit that masterpiece level for me. The story is about a human girl who comes in contact with a demon and ends up breaking a spell through Cinnamon. And he's like, you have to help me. Your goddess is actually not a goddess. She's this awful witch who's actually dead. And she is trying to kill all the demons using you and your heroes. And we have to go to her temple and annihilate the like vessel of her. So she's like, I don't really know about this. I don't know if this is for me. And he's like, you have to help me. And so he's like, I can't go in the temple, but you can. So they do it. They shatter this vessel. She's like, my job is done. And he's like, there's 3 more. She's like, what? So then they go on this adventure to take down this goddess, not goddess, and there's romance, there's a lot of violence, and this falls into sort of my favorite camp of cozy fantasy. It's not quite cozy fantasy because of how high the stakes are and just how much violence and on-page violence is portrayed. But that's my level of cozy. So it falls into this realm of fantasy romance books that I thoroughly enjoy. I'm eagerly awaiting to read the second book. I'm so excited. Then we have another fantasy book. I read a lot of fantasy in January. I'm so proud of myself. So we have Son of the Storm by Suyi Davies Okumboa, which I put in Would Read Again. This book is fantastic. It is a really incredible, darker fantasy with a lot of political intrigue, and it falls into, I'm trying to think like which fantasy books it sort of falls into the same category as. It reminds me a lot of some of the feelings I had when I was reading the 5th season. There's this really cool magic system, and I know that I really liked a book when I have a hard time describing it because I'm like, just read it. Just read it. Okay, then we have a for real romance book. Not that That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon wasn't for real. This one just doesn't have any fantasy in it. It is called Bombshell by Sarah McLean, and I ranked this under Would Read Again. So this is the first book in the Hell's Bells series by Sarah McLean. It is my first Sarah McLean book. It takes place in Victorian England. I'm trying to think of the exact year it takes place in. It's like kind of in the beginning parts of the Victorian era. And we follow this girl, Cecily, and it's second chance romance. So she has professed her love to this man, and he's like, I don't know, and then runs away to America. And she's like, well, I'm no good, and I'm just gonna sleep around and everything's gonna be great. She ends up coming in contact with this woman called the Duchess and is part of this group of ladies who protect other women in their society and sort of take down a lot of powerful men that are getting away with things that they shouldn't, but because of their stance in society, other men are protecting them. But they're like, we don't have to protect you at all. And then the man comes back because he is business partners with her sister, and her sister's having a baby, and I think he's the godfather. So he's like, I gotta show up. We come to find out that he's like, I love her, but I don't want to entrench her in my life and my secrets, and I need to keep her safe. And she's like, I don't know. There were a couple things that moved a little too fast for me, and the like non-communication over miscommunication is not something I enjoy, but I really liked the pacing. I liked the overall plot, that I can kind of get over the things that I didn't really like. And I just had a darn good time reading it, and that's all I can ask for out of a historical romance. Then we've come to my first DNF of the month, of the year, which is The Bandit Queens by Perini Schroff. And I remember seeing this book cover everywhere when it first came out, and the cover looks really cool and intriguing, and I was like, yep, I'm into it, let's give it a try. I finally got my hands on the audiobook, and right away I just kind of knew this book wasn't going to be for me. The writing style I wasn't really jiving with, and then there's some pretty explicit on-page sexual assault described and other things sort of in that camp that I was like, I'm not going to be able to enjoy myself reading this book. That's kind of one of my hard boundaries at this point. So I just said, I'm going to walk away before I don't enjoy myself and end up in a reading slump. I follow that up with another Witch Had Atellier book, volume 8. It's going in Would I Read Again? I don't think I need to elaborate further on that. And this was the point in the month where I was flip-flopping between finishing a book and DNFing a book. So I DNF'd The Fake Dating Game by Timothy Janofsky. And I really wanted to like this book. I loved the cover, I loved the concept, the writing style, not for me. I just could not get into it. I tried to flip forward in the book and see if something was grabbing me. I ended up skimming through a bunch of it to see if something would grab me, and overall I just had to say this book is not for me. Then we've got another DNF, which is Shadow of Night. This is the second book in the, gosh, what's it called? Oh no. Discovery of Witches, the Discovery of Witches series by Deborah Harkness. I loved the first book so much. I raced through the audiobook. I couldn't get enough, and I've been trying to get my hands on the sequel for months. I was on the waiting list on Libby forever. I think it was like 22 weeks or something, and I couldn't get into it. I was reading it little by little. I tried to listen in big bursts and see what was going on, and it just didn't have the same grip to me as the first book. And I think a lot of the sort of issues that I had with the first book were a lot more present in the beginning of the second book. So I was like, I have to walk away. And I think I'm just gonna watch the series and be okay with that. All right, then we've got two nonfiction books. So up first is Dear God, Dear Bones, Dear Yellow by Noor Hindi. It's a American-Palestinian poetry author, and this is a collection of poems. So I put this into excellent because I don't think this is something that I would read again, only because I'm not a poetry person. I don't read poetry. It is not something that I gravitate towards, and I do like to break it up every once in a while. I've read a couple books that are written in prose. I have read small poetry collections before. I mostly read this because it's an American Palestinian author, and I wanted to read something by a Palestinian author, and I'm really glad I did. These poems are visceral and enchanting. It is a really wonderful book. It is also incredibly difficult to read because it is so honest, and for that reason it goes into excellent. It is a fantastically crafted collection of poems. I really loved the pacing of them. They were all sort of in different poetry styles, and there was a through line through them, so I could really wrap my head around it. I also enjoyed that I wanted to take my time reading them. I didn't want to read the whole book in a day. I wanted to read 2 or 3, sit with them, think about how they made me feel, and then do the same thing the next day and the next day and the next day, and that's what I did. And then the last book that I read was Page Boy by Elliot Page. Again, going under excellent. I don't think I would read this again. I'm not one to reread memoirs, but it was a great book. I think where I struggled in it was listening to the audiobook. It's not a linear story. It does sort of jump back in time a lot, and that sort of, I had trouble wrapping my head around, but I'm really glad I listened to it. I want to read more memoirs this year, and in particular celebrity memoirs, so I'm glad that I started with this one. I'm happy that everything is mostly at the top. I don't really have anything too much in the middle. I would like to read a couple masterpiece books. It's okay that I read what I read. I am happy. I had a great reading month. There's so much of it that's from the beginning of the month that I'm like thinking about that DNF period where I was like, what do I want to read? And then I have a couple books left over that I need to decide what I'm doing with them that have rolled into February. So those are also playing into my psyche. But as I look at this, I'm like, what a great start to the year. I can tell the mood that I'm in based off of what I read and enjoyed and actually finished. And it makes me excited. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited to do these videos at the end of every month or at the beginning of a month. And then we'll sort of take a look at the whole thing at the end of the year. It feels like it's gonna be less daunting to really think about all the books that I end up reading within the whole year and sort of do it month by month. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this template is going to be available, so I'll pop the link down into the description box if you're interested in using my particular template. You could also look up other people's and see what they're doing. I would also love to know what your favorite read from January was or what you are currently reading. Let's talk about it in the comments section. I want to chat to you and let's engage. And if you liked what you saw, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything coming in the future. I started my weekly vlogs, which I'm really excited about, and I'm just getting into the groove of uploading on YouTube this year, and I'm really excited about it. That's it from me today. I will catch you in the next one. Bye!